Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ponytale Talk, global advice from a female CEO pioneer. I am Kimberly Lewis, and I have 25 years international executive experience, and I continue to hold an international general manager's position and a board position. But now I'm also a leadership trainer, coach, and motivational speaker. You can contact me on my website, www.globalbusinesstherapy.com. This podcast is brought to you by Global Business Therapy and produced by Raskin Resources and the great Patricia Raskin. And this is our second podcast, and it's called Preventing Shatters. Now, in our first podcast, we talked about breaking the glass ceiling. And even when you make it to the top or you're on your way up to the top, you always want to prevent shatters. And how do you do that? By making sure you have the right mindset and the right leadership skills. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. But first, if you're wondering where the name Ponytale Talk came from, I did explain it in my first podcast. But in a nutshell, I got the name from my great Aunt Elsie and my grandmother, who have long passed away, but they were both accomplished working women way back when. And even though I was quite small, I would often eavesdrop on their conversations as they sat around the kitchen table drinking their tea and cognac. They would talk about the struggles they had in the business world, and they would call these little chats Ponytale Talks. And that's where the name came from. And I later used it for my book, Ponytale Talk. It's all about you winning career strategies for women. Now, when I think about those little chats they had, and I think about those two, I always think about the mindset they must have had back then to accomplish what they did back then. And they both most have also had great leadership skills. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Mindset and leadership skills. But not just the leadership skills we all know about, the leadership skills you need to be a good leader. We all know what the experts consider top leadership skills. I mean, there are things such as the ability to create a vision for the future, a drive for results, problem solving, decision-making capabilities, the ability to inspire, motivate, and build relationships, honesty, integrity, and of course, you need technical and professional expertise. But these skills are the skills we can read about in every management book. What I want to talk about today are the leadership skills where men and women are wired differently. And I want to talk about mindset. Now, what I mean by mindset is where your head has to be when you finally reach the top, or where it has to be when you're on your way up the career ladder. So let's start with mindset. And let me tell you a little story that made me realize how important mindset is. When I finally landed my CEO position in Germany, typical for Germany and the German love of cars, a very good car package came with the position. Now, I'm not a big car fan, and actually I like small cars that are easy to park, easy to drive, easy to get into the small parking garages in Europe. So when the HR director gave me my choice of cars, they were all big, top-of-the-line cars. And, of course, we were in Germany, so the choices were either Mercedes, BMW, or Audi. But I told him I really did not want one of those cars. I wanted a smaller car, a practical car, something that was easy to park. And to be honest, I really didn't even care what brand it was. Now, when I said this to him, he was silent. He just sat there in astonishment. And he looked at me and he said, "You can't do that. You have to pick one of these cars on the list." Now, my first thought was, isn't this silly? Doesn't this company want to save money? So I asked why. And he explained to me that the car was a status symbol. And if the CEO chose a smaller car, then all the VPs and everybody else would have to choose even smaller cars. And I just could not do that to everybody. Now, I want you to wait a minute and think about this, okay? This was my mistake. But I want you to think about this. A guy probably would have never suggested what I suggested, right? And it's not just because a guy's love of cars, it's because of status. So what I realized, and I suddenly realized, I had not promoted my own status in my head. I did not have the right mindset. So I was still being too practical. And we women tend to do this to ourselves sometimes. Our realization of our accomplishments sometimes move at a slower pace than our careers. And this is what happened to me. So, back to the story. I put myself in the right mindset and I told him, okay, small, easy to park. I want a Porsche. Now, he looked at me and he actually considered this and looked it up. But then we found out that the Porsche was considered a sports car and it was frowned upon by the German tax authorities. So I ended up getting a top of the line BMW. So my message here is mindset is everything. You must think at the same level you are in. Do not let your mindset drag behind. Keep up with your accomplishments and promotions and never doubt your status. I am sure many of you had many times where you thought, oh gosh, I got the job, I can't believe it. And your thought process was still lingering someplace back in your previous position. Well, don't let this happen, please. Say to yourself, I got the position, I deserve the position, and I want everything that goes with it. Do this, and it will help you. Now, the other part of mindset that is very important for you is to always keep on competing. Your journey is like an athlete's journey to the Olympic Games. Think of your journey as first trying to make the Olympic trials and then going on to the Olympic Games. And to do this, you need to think competitively, and you must also always keep bettering your skills. Now, this is because everything is about you and your performance. Now, this does not mean you have to become narcissistic, but always put yourself first. We women often have a tendency to put others first. In my radio show, Leadership Beyond Borders on Voice America Business Channel, I had an interview with Dr. John Gray, author of Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, and we talked about this tendency, the caretaker mindset in women. This caretaker mindset very often makes us better managers because we encourage inclusion. Sometimes we have more empathy, but it can also hinder us. So how do I keep my mindset focused on my performance and myself? I do it by thinking about the sport of gymnastics. Now, I did gymnastics for many years, and I love to watch the sport, both men's and women's gymnastics. And I draw a parallel between my career journey and a gymnastics competition. As an executive, I am part of a team, and I want our team to win the team competition. So teamwork is important. But the teamwork is also about individual performance. So I have to learn to contribute, and I have to contribute my best. But there are also individual competitions in gymnastics, and there's only one gold medal in each individual event. And this parallels to the business world. There are lots of positions and lots of promotions available, but only one person will get the job. That is why I see a lot of parallels between winning in gymnastics and winning in the job. And in both situations, you need to train your skills if you want to win. But also in both situations, it is often that the individuals, and many individuals have the same skills. You see that in gymnastics. But it comes down to how you perform those skills that makes a difference. And in the work world is very often about how men and women exhibit their skills, and we do that in different ways. In my series, Leadership Beyond Borders on Voice America Business Channel, in the same interview with Dr. Gray, we also talked about some of the management style differences between men and women. And this is what I refer to when I say that men and women may have the same skills, but they may perform them differently, basically because we're wired differently. And you need to understand this if you want to win the competition and you want to make yourself visible in a positive light. And one of the skills that men and women demonstrate differently is their decision-making process. And I would like to focus on this skill today because even when I reached my CEO position, I really didn't understand this. I didn't understand we were wired differently in our decision-making processes. And I learned it the hard way when I was a CEO. And what happened to me was one day after a board meeting, my board chair pulled me aside and said to me that he did not like the way I was making decisions. He said that most of my decisions were good. He even called some of them excellent, but he did not like the way I went about making them. It did not reflect the executive management decision process, as he put it, that he expected and he wanted to see. So he wanted to send me to executive coaching. Now, this was back when executive coaching was seen more as a punishment than an improvement tool. Today, it's seen as an improvement tool. Today, it's viewed quite differently. And in my show, Leadership Beyond Borders, I also interview John Leary Joyce, the head of the Academy of Executive Coaching in London. And he and I talk about how it's viewed differently today than it was quite a few years ago. But I honestly, when he told me this, I really didn't know what I was supposed to change. I had no idea why I was going to executive coaching. And I asked him if anybody else was going, and he said no. So they sent me off to executive coaching, and let me say it's the best thing I ever did, because what I discovered, and I discovered a lot, and I discovered that it wasn't about my decision making. It was about my decision making process. He could not understand it because we were wired differently. We women tend to process our decisions out loud and very often give way too much information. We often like to discuss options out loud before reaching a decision, where men seem to quietly contemplate and very often do not discuss out loud how they come to a decision. Our processing can be very confusing to our male colleagues, and they may not feel comfortable with this processing, especially if you're the only woman on a board like I was. Now, we women, we have a great ability to think at multiple levels at the same time and process a lot of information and a lot of stimuli. We know we do this. And this is a great advantage to us when it comes to making decisions. But it can be scary when it's processed out loud. This can also lead sometimes to the perception that women are irrational or emotional in their decision-making process. So my tip to you is if you do not want to confuse your male colleagues, then keep your decision-making process to yourself unless it's asked for. Keep it simple and direct. You do not need to share every thought with somebody else. Important it is that you are able to make sound decisions, and this is what I practice today. Another thing I learned was there was also a common perception that women make emotional decisions when they are stressed, although many studies have proven this is not true. But this is also another good reason to keep the waterworks out of the workplace and keep emotions out of the workplace. So all in all, my entire coaching experience was great. I not only learned about the decision-making process, but I learned about communication differences between men and women. And we're going to cover this in another upcoming podcast. What I learned from the entire experience is summed up in a quote by Yung Chang, Wild Swans, Three Daughters of China. And that quote is, "Go in the direction your head is pointed." Now, I've kind of added on to this quote a little bit. Sorry about that, Yung Chang, but I've added on, go in the direction your head is pointed. Do not explain how you picked that direction. And if you're asked how you picked it, keep the explanation short and simple. We women make excellent leaders because of our instinctive ability to understand and integrate social, environmental, situational, and emotional considerations into business decisions. But there are a lot of business skills where we differ from men, and our style differs quite a bit. Now, I've given you one example today, but in upcoming podcasts, we're going to take a look at some other skills where we differ. So for today, my message to you is if you want to prevent shatters once you reach the top or on the way to the top, keep the mindset, stay competitive, and begin to recognize the skills where your habits may differ from your male colleagues. Now, once again, I'm Kimberly Lewis, CEO, author of Ponytale Talk. It's all about you, winning career strategies for women. If you like this series, give us a like, and we'll continue podcasting. Please also listen to my leadership show on Voice America Business Station, Leadership Beyond Borders. I interview a lot of great leaders, a lot of experts, and you can learn a lot. I am available for motivational speaking in both the United States and Europe. Look at my website, globalbusinesstherapy.com. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter. Now, I'm looking forward to having you tune in to our next podcast, the continuation of this series. And our next podcast, we're going to talk about avoiding stone throwers and curveballs that you may encounter on your career journey. Thank you. Remember, contact me at globalbusinesstherapy.com.